To everyone in the quiet town of Maplewood, Daniel and Claire Foster seemed like the kind of couple people dreamed of becoming. They had a beautiful two-story home framed by blooming rose bushes, a friendly golden retriever, and a marriage that appeared built on trust and love. Daniel was a talented architect known for his calm demeanor and creative mind. Claire ran a local art gallery that was often filled with laughter, music, and the scent of fresh paint. Together, they hosted dinner parties, volunteered for local charities, and never missed a community event. People often said that if love had a picture, it would look like them. Yet beneath their calm, smiling faces, something invisible had started to shift. The harmony that everyone admired was quietly breaking. Daniel had always been devoted, but recently his devotion had turned into something more controlling. He began showing up at Claire's gallery without notice, pretending to surprise her with lunch but really just checking who she was with. At home, he started asking more questions: where she had been, who she had talked to, why she took so long to reply to his messages. Claire brushed it off as concern at first, but she could feel the difference between care and control. The shift in Daniel's behavior grew subtle but disturbing. He would stand silently at the window late at night, watching her car pull into the driveway, waiting for her to come inside. He checked her social media posts and quietly deleted any comments from male friends. Sometimes, Claire would find her phone placed differently than she left it, or notice that her email password had been changed, though she hadn't done it herself. Each time she asked, Daniel would smile and tell her she was imagining things. To the rest of the world, their life continued to look perfect: couple photos at the park, anniversary posts filled with affectionate words, cheerful appearances at parties. No one could see the tension building behind closed doors, or how Daniel's love had begun to twist into obsession. Claire often stayed late at her gallery just to avoid the silence at home. She didn't know that Daniel was keeping track of her every movement, convinced that he was losing the woman he loved. And in his mind, losing her wasn't an option. For Daniel, control had become love, and love had turned into something far more dangerous than anyone could see. The morning Claire disappeared began like any other, quiet and calm, with soft sunlight spilling over the maple trees that lined the street. Daniel claimed he woke to an empty side of the bed, assuming Claire had left early for work. Her car was gone, and her favorite scarf was missing from the coat rack. At first, he thought nothing of it. But as hours passed, unease began to creep in. When her gallery called asking why she hadn't shown up, Daniel's voice cracked with worry. By evening, he dialed the police to report his wife missing. The town reacted quickly. Maplewood was small, people cared about one another. Flyers with Claire's photo were taped to streetlights, search parties gathered in parks, and volunteers combed nearby woods and rivers. The image of Daniel on the evening news, holding a framed photo of Claire, melted hearts. His voice shook as he begged for her safe return, calling her the light of his life. The community wrapped him in sympathy, seeing only a grieving husband desperate for answers. But detectives noticed details that didn't add up. Daniel said Claire had gone for her morning walk, but her running shoes were still inside the closet. Her phone, purse, and car keys were later found inside her parked car near a remote hiking trail, a place she rarely visited alone. There was no sign of a struggle, no footprints leading away, and no surveillance cameras nearby. It looked as though she had simply stepped out of existence. Police began to study Daniel closely. His grief appeared genuine, but something about his words felt off. He never spoke about their recent days together or mentioned any arguments. Instead, he repeated how perfect their marriage was, how she could never have left him willingly. To the detectives, his insistence sounded rehearsed, almost protective, not of her, but of himself. As days turned into weeks, hope started to fade. The search expanded into nearby towns, but no trace of Claire appeared. Reporters called it the Maplewood mystery, a vanishing that made no sense. Behind the scenes, investigators were starting to suspect that the person crying the loudest for Claire's return might be the one who knew exactly where she was. The perfect marriage that once inspired envy was now surrounded by whispers of deception and fear. As investigators dug deeper into Claire's life, the illusion of perfection surrounding the Fosters began to crumble. Hidden beneath the cheerful social media posts and smiling photos was a story of fear, control, and quiet desperation. Detectives discovered that in the months leading up to her disappearance, Claire had started creating a life that Daniel knew nothing about. She had opened a private bank account under her maiden name and transferred small amounts of money into it, careful not to raise suspicion. She had even signed a short-term lease on a small apartment on the other side of town, paid for in cash. Her friends revealed that Claire had grown distant and anxious, avoiding gatherings and flinching at sudden noises. A close friend told police that Claire had confided about feeling trapped, that Daniel's protectiveness had become suffocating. She said he tracked her phone, monitored her spending, and even showed up at places she hadn't told him about. Claire had been planning to leave quietly once she felt financially ready, afraid of what Daniel might do if he found out. When investigators confronted Daniel with these discoveries, his calm and cooperative tone began to shift. He denied knowing about the new apartment and claimed he and Claire were happier than ever. But when they checked his phone records, a darker truth surfaced. In the weeks before Claire vanished, Daniel had called a private investigator multiple times. He claimed it was to keep her safe, saying she thought someone was following her. Yet no such report existed, and the so-called investigator couldn't be located. Police searched the foster home again, paying closer attention this time. In the basement, they noticed several newly replaced tiles and a fresh layer of paint that looked oddly uneven. Forensics found traces of cleaning chemicals on the floor and faint marks on the wall, too faint to draw conclusions but suspicious enough to keep the investigation alive. A breakthrough came when a gas station camera from a nearby highway captured Daniel's car late at night on the same day Claire disappeared. He hadn't mentioned leaving home that night, and his excuse for being there, a drive to clear his head, didn't convince anyone. The deeper detectives looked, the clearer it became that Claire's disappearance wasn't random. Someone had planned it, and every new clue pointed closer to Daniel. Winter crept into Maplewood, covering the streets and woods in a quiet blanket of snow. The search for Claire had slowed, and most people assumed the case would remain unsolved. Then, after months of silence, a discovery changed everything. A hiker walking near a frozen creek on the outskirts of town stumbled upon something strange buried beneath the ice, a dark, weathered suitcase half covered by branches. When authorities opened it, they found women's belongings inside, a torn piece of clothing, a broken phone case, and a wedding ring engraved with the initial C.F. There were faint traces of blood on the fabric, later confirmed to match Claire's DNA. The news spread quickly, sending shockwaves through the quiet community. Police immediately searched the area and found tire tracks near the creek, tracks that matched the tires on Daniel Foster's car. With renewed determination, detectives obtained another warrant for his property, focusing on the basement that had once seemed suspicious. This time, they dug deeper, literally. Beneath a section of freshly poured concrete, they discovered a hidden compartment, sealed tightly as if meant to stay buried forever. Inside were items that painted a chilling picture of Daniel's obsession. A camera was mounted behind an air vent, positioned to record Claire's art studio without her knowledge. Several labeled tapes were found in a box nearby, each dated and titled with disturbing precision: Tuesday morning, gallery night, Claire alone. The videos showed hours of footage of Claire painting, reading, or simply sitting by herself, unaware she was being watched. The evidence was overwhelming, but there was more. In a locked drawer, investigators uncovered a notebook filled with Daniel's handwritten notes, observations about Claire's behavior, her schedule, even her emotions. One page read, "She's pulling away. I have to make sure she doesn't leave." The final entry was dated the night she disappeared. Confronted with these discoveries, Daniel's calm, grieving husband act began to crumble. His co-workers described how he had grown paranoid in the months before Claire vanished, obsessing over her every move. The kind, charming man the town once admired had turned into a stranger consumed by control. What had once been seen as devotion now looked like the blueprint for something far darker, a love that had transformed into possession, and possession that had ended in tragedy. When Daniel was finally brought into the interrogation room, the weight of months of lies seemed to settle on his face. The calm, composed husband everyone had once admired was gone. Investigators laid out the evidence piece by piece: the suitcase from the creek, the tapes from his basement, the notes written in his own hand. For hours he denied everything, insisting that he loved Claire too much to hurt her. But when confronted with the undeniable proof, his voice broke. The truth spilled out, fragmented and twisted by guilt. Daniel admitted that on the night Claire disappeared, they had argued about her plan to move out. She told him she couldn't live under his control any longer and that she had found a small apartment where she could start over. Those words shattered him. He claimed he only wanted to stop her from leaving, that he never meant to harm her. But his version of events didn't match the evidence. Investigators believed it wasn't a moment of rage, it was a plan that had been forming for weeks. The surveillance, the obsession, the hidden recordings, all signs of a man who couldn't let go. In his confession, Daniel described moving her body to the creek after realizing what he'd done. He said he thought the cold water would keep her safe until he could think. His words made no sense, caught between delusion and denial. The truth was clear: Daniel's obsession had destroyed everything he claimed to love. The trial that followed drew national attention. The perfect husband turned killer, the story captivated everyone. Former friends and neighbors filled the courtroom, unable to reconcile the man they knew with the monster described in evidence. The jury took less than a day to find Daniel guilty of first-degree murder. He was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Even after his conviction, Daniel's obsession lingered. During a final search of his basement, police found several unsent letters addressed to Claire. In them, he wrote about seeing her in his dreams, about watching her through the lens, as if she was still there. Each letter ended the same way: "You're still mine." Maplewood never recovered from the story. The Fosters' house was sold and later abandoned, whispered about by locals as cursed. To everyone who once envied their perfect marriage, the truth served as a haunting reminder that behind even the most beautiful smiles, darkness can hide, waiting to be revealed.